Hey gang, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of the Prima Games Battlefield 3 Tip of the Week. I'm Viper.
I'm Rumpo.
And we are Fireteam Hooligan of BattleChatterOnline.com. Today we're going to take a look at Conquest. Conquest, of course, is the oldest and arguably the most popular game mode in the Battlefield series. Conquest is available on all the maps in Battlefield 3 with up to 64 players on the PC and 24 players on consoles. Now the objective is pretty simple. Each team gets an inventory of tickets, and the team that depletes the other team's tickets first wins, and the team that has all of its tickets depleted loses. It's pretty straightforward. But we've got a quick top 5 list, a pretty basic top 5 list that we've compiled that may very well help you to be more successful when you play Conquest on Battlefield 3, and we'll start with Establish a Foothold. Now, why is establishing a foothold so important? Well, Rumpo, why don't you tell the folks at home why it's so important to establish a foothold when playing Conquest?
Well, when you first spawn playing Conquest on Battlefield 3, you spawn at your home base. Now, spawning at your home base is not ideal because you have a large distance to travel to get to any of the objectives normally, even though yours will be the closest. So when we say home objective, we're referring to the objective which is closest to your home base. Now, as quickly as you can, move to that home objective. It should be in a neutralized state, and you want to capture that objective for your team. Most often, it'll be a place where you can spawn, not just spawn infantry, but occasionally on some maps, you'll also be able to spawn vehicles at that location. So it is important to establish a foothold because it is the entire base of operation for your game of Conquest that you're playing.
That's right, and it's very important to remember that once you have taken this foothold, it's very important to hold this foothold. Of course, that brings us to the next tip, and that is to take the midfield. After you've established a foothold, it's very important to take the midfield. Explain to the folks at home exactly what that means when we say take the midfield.
When you're playing Conquest on Battlefield 3, the maps are designed for balance, so each side is going to have an objective which is close to their base. Now, in the middle of the map is typically going to be anywhere from 1 to 3 objectives which are hotly contested. For example, let's use Caspian Border. If you spawn as a Marine, then you are close to Alpha, so that would be your foothold, and what you would do is take Alpha, establish your foothold, and then taking the midfield would mean moving over and taking Bravo and Charlie. Bravo and Charlie would give you 3 of the 4 objectives on that map, which is when you start to bleed your enemy of tickets like you mentioned earlier in the video, and that's how you win on Conquest. By taking, let's say, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie on Caspian Border as the Marines, you've established your foothold and you've taken the midfield.
Next, we move to hold the line. Why is holding the line so important? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll let Rumpo explain.
Again, we'll just use Caspian Border because it is a very popular Conquest map. If you're holding 3 objectives on Caspian Border, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, then you are bleeding the enemy of tickets. In order to keep that up and to win the game, you have to continue that. So your objective at that point is going to be to stop the enemy from taking back Bravo and Charlie, and of course, stopping them from taking Alpha. If you can maintain those 3 objectives, that's all you have to do to win the game.
It's also important to remember you don't have to rush into the AO trying to get everything done. As the old saying goes, slow is steady and steady is fast. So establish a foothold, take the midfield, and then hold the line. I know what you're thinking. Why don't we just push into the heart of the enemy force's stronghold? Well, it's very important to remember our next tip, and that is don't be greedy.
Absolutely. Don't be greedy, and the reason you don't want to be greedy is that a desperate enemy is going to resort to desperate measures. So again, let's just quickly think about Caspian Border. Let's say that you're a Marine and you have Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, and you get greedy and you take the final objective, which is Delta. That enemy team, eventually, someone is going to spawn in a jet, they're going to take off, and they are going to parachute out onto Alpha, and now you're not holding the line. Now you have the enemy forces behind you, which is something that you never want to do. You always want to keep them in front of you. So in order to make sure that you keep them in front of you, always leave them their final objective, which is a natural place that they will want to spawn, and you can fight a forward-facing enemy rather than having to turn your forces in 2 different directions.
To review, establish a foothold, take the midfield, hold the line, don't be greedy. And while this last one is not the most important of the 5, it can be very valuable and sometimes can mean the difference between winning and losing. Don't think for 1 second that because you do have a majority of the navs that you can just sit still and rest on your laurels. The best way to make sure that you don't find yourself in peril is to react and reinforce.
Well, react and reinforce is the final tip, and ideally it would come after all the other tips, but as you know, no plan ever works out exactly as you intend it to. So react and reinforce is something that you may have to do at any point during this process. But let's assume that you have 3 objectives on Caspian Border. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. You're holding the line, you're not being greedy, but still, somebody gets behind you and starts to take your precious home base nav of Alpha. You have to react and reinforce. You can't let them take that objective. You have to leave certain amount of forces at Bravo and Charlie to hold the line, and you also have to turn forces around and take care of that threat behind you. So no matter what's happening, you have to control 3 objectives the majority of the time on Caspian Border in order to win the game. If something should happen to any one of those objectives, or something should go not according to plan, you have to react to that, and you have to reinforce. So you have to send assets, foot mobiles, troops if you will, to the objectives which need attention, and you have to maintain the objectives that you already have.
As we like to say, a bad decision is better than no decision. There you have it, a top 5 list to help you become more successful when playing Conquest on Battlefield 3. It's all part of your Prima Games Battlefield 3 Tip of the Week. For more about Battlefield 3 and to pick up your copy of the official Battlefield 3 strategy e-guide, get on over to primagames.com. Prima Games, strategy where, when, and how you want it. For everybody at Prima Games and BattleChatterOnline.com, I'm Viper.
I'm Rumpo.
We are Fireteam Hooligan of BattleChatterOnline.com. Until next time, as usual, doom on you, Mr. Tango.